Good evening. The Decalogue, or the Ten Commandments, is probably one of the most recognizable and famous pieces of literature in all of recorded history. There was a time when even public school children were taught it and had to learn it by heart. Although that era is sadly long past, still, you will find adults of a certain age, if asked, may recite it, all of them, if not most of them. In New Mexico, it has even found its way in the form of stone tablets in Ashbow Park on Cerrillos Road. And of course, let's not forget the famous La Lunos Decalogue stone, which purports to be the real thing. The Decalogue was once considered the basis of all Western civilization and law. But recently, that accepted fact has been challenged by many groups whose rallying cry is freedom from religion, as if to say that thou shalt not kill or steal are bad values not applicable in our more modern and progressive society. What happened? What's going on? Another more curious question for me is the fact that from a Jewish perspective, the Ten Commandments, in both its versions, are supposedly a uniquely Jewish set of rules, meant for a Jewish readership. Yet most of the commandments are already part and parcel of the 7 Noahide laws, which all of mankind are obligated to abide by from time immemorial. The Torah contains 613 commandments. These 10 are ostensibly mere samples. Now, if I were to prepare a random sample of mitzvot for the Jewish people, I perhaps would cite, thou shalt put on talit, thou shalt put on tefillin, thou shalt not eat pork or wear mixed wool and linen garments. These specific laws, with the exception of the observance of the Sabbath day, are universal and were already well known, even in the flesh pots of Egypt. So let's answer this second question first, and we'll have an understanding of the first. Pirkei Avos tells us that he who embarrasses his neighbor in public is akin to a shedder of blood, and he forfeits his share in the world to come. If someone perhaps misrepresents himself to you or to others, and he assures you that he is an expert in his field, having received high marks by his peers, but in reality he's a bluffer, then he is to be considered violating the sin of thou shalt not steal. He stole your heart, your mind. Finally, if one violates the standards of Jewish modesty in dress, as well as in speech or mores, he is close to violating the essence of morality. Thou shalt not commit adultery. So you see, the Torah wants us to observe the 10 Commandments, but according to a very high standard indeed. What about the rest of the world? So the Medrash in Psikta Rabbah conveys a beautiful Medrash that when God descended to give the Torah to mankind, he first went to all the nations of the earth and asked them if they would be willing to accept it. The children of Esav asked God, what is written therein? God told them, thou shalt not kill. And they said, no, we cannot accept that command. Our very essence is based on the sword. Even our father Isaac told us, Al charbecha techyeh, thou shalt live by the sword. We cannot accept the Torah. God then addressed all the other nations along similar lines. He went to Ammon and Moab, and they would not acknowledge the prohibition of immorality because their whole essence was an unholy one. We know the story of Lot and how they came into being. Yishmael would not recognize the prohibition against stealing because it violated every fiber of their being. So the question is, but aren't they already obligated in these prohibitions? All humanity is prohibited in these basic moral imperatives. The answer is that it's all a matter of standards. Of course, Esav understood the concept of thou shalt not kill, but God wanted him to apply that on a higher Torah level. Even embarrassing someone is akin to murder. That was what Esav could not accept. He understood that perhaps it's wrong to hurt people's feelings, but to consider it actual murder? The Torah's definition of bloodshed was way too radical for him. When Yishmael was told as well, thou shalt not steal, the idea of even subtle stealing of a person's opinions, being dishonest, feeding him fake news, or fooling him into thinking you are someone that you are not, these are perhaps improper ways to behave, but stealing? That was way too much for Yishmael to handle. And finally, Ammon and Moab. They were told not to commit adultery. They could never imagine or conceive that lewd dress or cursing is akin to adultery. Modesty, of course, is a nice form of behavior, but to have it ensconced in actual law, this is something they simply could not accept. Today, we recognize, though, just how important those standards are. For law or not, whenever they are not followed, then that ultimately results in the decay of society. And that brings us to the answer of our first question. How did we get here? How did we get to the chaotic situation we all face today? I'd like to conclude on a happy note. You may know that back in the 90s, I served as the chief rabbi of the city of Trieste, Italy. And when I got there, I was told that I needed to learn the proper melody for the Decalogue, according to the local custom. They taught it to me, and I was blown away. With your permission, I'd like to share a sampling, perhaps the last 5 of the 10 Commandments. Lo tirtzach, lo tin'af, lo tignov, lo tanebrech et shaker, lo tachbod metrecha, bavado v'shoro v'chamoro, mishoro v'chol asher l'reyecha. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.